"Mom, can you believe it? My wife lost her job after 10 years, Caleb shouted, bursting into my house that afternoon. Now you and I are going to support her and her mother. I already transferred my entire nest egg, $50,000, my son declared, beaming as if he had just announced the best news in the world. I have bills to pay, expensive prescriptions, and a mortgage payment due in a week. I just smiled. And what are you going to live on now, Caleb? I asked calmly. And where? My son fell silent. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His look of pride vanished in a second. The next sentence I spoke made him bite his tongue. But before I tell you what I said, let me explain how we got to this moment. Because what my son had just done wasn't an isolated act of misguided generosity. It was the result of years of bad decisions, silent manipulation, and a mother who was always there to prop him up without him even realizing it. And I want you to understand every detail, every step that brought us here, because only then will you understand why that simple question, and what are you going to live on now, and where, was enough to make my son realize the magnitude of what he had just done. I want you to know my story. I want you to know who I am, and who my son is, and how a 68-year-old woman who spent her whole life working and sacrificing reached the point of having to confront her own child with a truth he never wanted to see. My name is Barbara. I am 68 years old, and all my life I have been a working woman. I don't come from money. I didn't go to college, and I didn't inherit anything other than the will to survive and the habit of getting up every morning, no matter how tired I was. I married young, at 20, to a good man named Robert. He worked in construction, putting up drywall, hauling bags of cement under the scorching sun or in the pouring rain, doing whatever it took to bring money home. I took care of the house and did seamstress work on the side, fixing neighbors' clothes, hemming pants, embroidering tablecloths for weddings and baptisms. I didn't earn much, but every dollar helped. 2 years after we got married, Caleb was born, our only child, and for 12 years, we were happy. We didn't have luxuries. We didn't go on vacations. We didn't drive a new car or own our own home, but we had enough. We had food on the table, a roof over our heads, and we had each other. That was more than enough. Until one day, everything changed. Robert didn't come home from work. There was an accident at the site. A beam wasn't secured properly. That was it. In an instant, my husband was gone, and I, at 32, was left a widow, alone, with a 12-year-old boy who depended completely on me. There was no settlement, no life insurance, nothing but a coffin and a few words of condolence from people who later disappeared. I had to get up. I didn't have the luxury of staying in bed crying over my loss, although God knows how much I needed to. I had to feed Caleb. I had to pay the rent. I had to survive. I got a job at a uniform factory, sewing school uniforms 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. The pay was minimum wage, but it was something. At night, when Caleb was asleep, I kept sewing, now on my own, finishing orders for neighbors who paid me a few dollars to fix their clothes. I slept 4, sometimes 3 hours a night. My hands started to ache, my fingers swelled, my back creaked every morning, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to get sick, to rest, to give up. Caleb was my responsibility, and I wasn't going to fail him like life had failed us. My son grew up. He grew up seeing his mother work until she dropped. He grew up knowing that everything he had cost sacrifice. And he grew up to be a good kid, studious, responsible, with dreams of becoming someone. When he finished high school with a high GPA, he told me he wanted to go to college, that he wanted to study engineering. I didn't have the money. I had no savings. But I wasn't going to be the one to say no to my son. I sold the few pieces of jewelry I had left from my marriage, some gold earrings Robert had given me for our anniversary, a thin chain that belonged to my mother. With that, I paid for his first semester. Then I took out a small loan, worked double shifts at the factory, and accepted every sewing job that came my way, no matter how difficult or low-paying. For 5 years, I lived like that. 5 years where I barely saw my son because he was studying and I was working. 5 years where my hands became completely deformed by arthritis, where my body started sending me the bill for years of abuse. But Caleb graduated. My son became an engineer. He got a good job at a construction firm, with a salary I had never dreamed of earning in my entire life. And for the first time in decades, I breathed a sigh of relief. For the first time, I thought that maybe, just maybe, I could rest a little too. I retired from the factory at 62. The Social Security check they gave me was a joke, $400 a month. But at least I didn't have to get up at 5 in the morning to work inhuman hours anymore. I kept sewing from home because $400 doesn't cover anything, but at least I could do it at my own pace, without supervisors, without pressure. Caleb moved into his own apartment when he was 26. I was proud of him. My son was independent. He had his life, his job, his future. A year later, he met Jessica. Jessica was a 30-year-old woman, well-dressed, always impeccable, with a stable job at a marketing firm where she made good money. The first time I met her, she came to my house with Caleb. She greeted me politely, with a perfect smile. But there was something in her eyes that made me uncomfortable. It was a cold, calculating look, as if she were evaluating me and had already decided I wasn't worth much. She didn't say anything offensive, didn't do anything wrong, but a mother knows. A mother feels when someone doesn't have good intentions for her child. But I kept quiet. I wasn't going to be the meddling mother-in-law who ruins her son's relationship over a simple hunch. Caleb was in love, or at least he said he was, and I had no right to interfere. They got married when Caleb was 27. It was a big, elegant wedding, paid for almost entirely by Jessica's family. I could barely contribute a few floral arrangements I made myself and a simple dress I bought at a discount store. I felt out of place all day, like a guest at my own son's wedding. But I smiled for the photos. I hugged my son. I wished him all the happiness in the world. The first few years of marriage seemed to go well. Caleb visited me occasionally, told me they were doing fine, that Jessica was still working, that they lived comfortably. But the visits became less frequent. First, he came every week, then every 2 weeks, then once a month. And when he came, he was always in a rush. Jessica almost never came with him. She always had work, always had commitments. There was always something more important than visiting her mother-in-law. And when she did come, she stayed in the car, waiting, honking the horn if Caleb took more than 20 minutes. I never said anything. I didn't want to be the nagging mother, the one demanding attention, the one making her son feel guilty for having his own life. 3 years ago, my health got worse. The years of excessive work took their toll. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. The prescriptions I needed cost over $200 a month, and that's not counting the doctor's co-pays. With my miserable Social Security check and the few dollars I earned sewing, I couldn't make ends meet. I started rationing my pills, taking only half the dose so they would last twice as long. Caleb found out and got upset. "Mom, you can't do that. It's dangerous," he scolded me. "You need to take your full medication or you're going to get sicker." I explained the situation to him, that between the mortgage I was still paying, utilities, food, and now the medicine, I couldn't make it to the end of the month. Caleb sighed, pulled out his wallet, and gave me $200. "Buy your medicine, Mom, please," he said with genuine concern, and I accepted it because I needed those pills to stay alive. Since then, Caleb started helping me financially. Every month, he gave me between $100 and $300, depending on how he was doing. I always thanked him, always told him it wasn't necessary, but the truth is that without that help, I wouldn't have been able to survive, and it hurt. It hurt deeply to depend on my son after having supported him all by myself for so many years. I felt like a burden. A year ago, Caleb proposed opening a joint bank account. "Mom, this way it's easier. I can deposit money directly to you, and if you have an emergency, you can use the debit card without having to wait for me," he explained. It seemed practical. I signed the papers without thinking much about it. They gave me a debit card linked to that account, and Caleb started depositing between $200 and $300 every month. I used that money exclusively for my medicine and medical emergencies. I never spent a cent on anything else. It was my lifeline. And so time passed. I kept living my quiet, simple life, sewing to earn a few extra dollars, visiting my neighbor Susan, who was my age and my only close friend, going to my doctor's appointments every 2 months, taking my pills religiously. Caleb kept visiting me, though less and less. And Jessica remained a ghost in my life, a daughter-in-law who existed only in the stories my son told me, but was never truly present. Until 6 months ago, when I noticed something strange. I checked the balance of the joint account because I needed to withdraw money to buy my medicine, and I saw there was less than I expected. I thought maybe Caleb hadn't deposited that month, that maybe he had extra expenses. I didn't think much of it. But the next month, the same thing happened, and the next one too. The money Caleb deposited was disappearing faster than usual, and I wasn't spending it. I checked the account activity and saw withdrawals I hadn't made. Amounts of $50, $100, $200 taken out at ATMs in areas I never went to. At first, I thought it was a bank error, some fraud, something. But then I understood. Caleb was taking money out of that account. The account that was supposedly for my medical emergencies. My son was using it as his personal piggy bank. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't want to confront him. I thought maybe he needed the money for something important, some emergency he didn't want to tell me about so as not to worry me. I justified his behavior because he was my son, and I had always justified everything he did. But something inside me started to change. I started paying more attention. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way Caleb talked about Jessica had changed. He didn't mention her with the same affection as before. Now, when he talked about her, there was a certain tiredness in his voice, a certain resignation. Jessica wants to remodel the kitchen. Jessica wants to change the sofa. Jessica says we need a newer car. Everything was Jessica wants, Jessica says, Jessica needs. And Caleb obeyed. Caleb worked more overtime. Caleb took out loans. Caleb went into debt to give Jessica everything she asked for. And I saw my son tired, stressed, aging prematurely. But he kept smiling and saying everything was fine. One day, 4 months ago, Caleb came to visit me and looked particularly exhausted. He had deep circles under his eyes. He had lost weight. His shoulders were slumped, as if he were carrying the whole world on them. I got worried. "Son, are you okay?" I asked him while pouring him coffee in my small kitchen. He tried to smile, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm tired, Mom. Just that," he replied. "I'm working a lot lately." I asked him why he was working so much, if they were having financial problems. Caleb shook his head quickly. "No, Mom. Everything is fine. It's just that we want to save up to buy a house. We're tired of paying rent." That seemed reasonable. Logical. Until he added something else. Also, Jessica's mom moved in with us 2 months ago. Linda lost her job, and Jessica insisted she come live with us until she finds something new. Those words hit me like a rock. Jessica's mom, Linda, living with them. A woman I knew was barely 55, perfectly capable of working, now being supported by my son. And my son accepting it without question because Jessica had decided it. I didn't say anything at that moment. I just nodded and gave him more coffee. But inside, something broke. Because I understood in that instant that my son was being used. That Jessica wasn't just spending his money on personal whims, but now she had also brought her mother into the equation for Caleb to support as well. And my son, my poor son who had been raised to be generous, to help, to never say no to anyone in need, was being exploited by his own wife. I decided to investigate a little. I called Susan, my neighbor, who was a wise woman with many contacts in the neighborhood. "Susan, I need you to help me with something," I told her when I went to visit her that afternoon. "Tell me what's going on, Barbara," she replied as she served me tea in her modest but cozy living room. I told her about Caleb's situation. I told her about Jessica, about Linda, about the money disappearing from the joint account. Susan listened attentively, shaking her head with a serious expression. "That woman is using you and your son, Barbara," she told me bluntly. "And the worst part is your son doesn't realize it because he's blinded. You need to open your eyes, and you also need him to open his." I asked her what I could do. Susan suggested I talk to someone who knew the law, someone who could advise me on how to protect my money and assets. "I have a friend, Arthur. He's a retired lawyer," she said. "He can guide you without charging you anything. I've known him for years, and he's good people." I accepted. A week later, I was sitting in the small home office Arthur had, explaining my entire situation. Arthur was a man in his 60s, gray-haired, with thick glasses and a kind but serious expression. He listened to every word, without interrupting. When I finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Barbara, the first thing you need to do is close that joint account," he told me firmly. "If your son is withdrawing money without your permission, technically it's not illegal because it's a shared account, but morally it's wrong, and financially it's hurting you. You need to protect your money." I nodded. Arthur continued. "You also need to document everything. Every cent you've spent on your son over the years, every sacrifice you made, not because you're going to charge him for it, but because you need to be clear on how much you've given and how much you've received. That will help you make decisions with a cool head and not with your heart." He gave me a notebook and asked me to start writing everything down. Caleb's college expenses, the loans I took out, the overtime I worked, everything. And also to record every suspicious withdrawal from the joint account. "I'm going to help you get organized, Barbara," Arthur said warmly. "But I need you to understand something. You are not responsible for solving your adult son's life. He is 35. He has a job. He has a wife. If they make bad financial decisions, it is not your obligation to bail them out." Those words hurt because I knew he was right. But they also liberated me, because for the first time in my life, someone was giving me permission to say no, to set boundaries, to stop sacrificing myself for someone who didn't need me anymore, or at least shouldn't need me. I spent the next few weeks documenting everything. I filled page after page of the notebook with numbers, dates, receipts I had kept for years. I calculated that I had spent approximately $42,000 on Caleb's education, adding up tuition, books, transportation, food, everything. Money I didn't have, but that I got by working until I destroyed my body. I also documented the unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account. In 6 months, Caleb had taken out more than $1,800 without telling me. Money that was for my prescriptions, for my emergencies, and that he was using for who knows what. Susan came to visit me often. She brought me tea, we sat in my small living room, and we talked for hours. She gave me strength when I felt weak, when guilt threatened to make me back down. "It's not your fault, Barbara," she repeated over and over. "You were a good mother. You did everything you could, and more. Now your son needs to learn to be a real man, not a puppet manipulated by his wife." Arthur also visited me. We reviewed the documents, organized the information, prepared a plan. He helped me close the joint account without Caleb realizing it immediately. I transferred the little money that was left to a new account I opened solely in my name. When Caleb noticed, it would be too late. He also helped me draft a formal letter establishing clear boundaries. The letter explained that I could no longer be his financial crutch, that I needed to take care of myself, that he was a responsible adult, and that I trusted he could handle his own life without depending on his elderly mother. Arthur suggested I not give him the letter yet. "Wait for the right moment," he advised. "Wait for him to come ask you for something, because he will come. And when he comes, that's when you give him this and tell him the truth." And so I waited. I followed my normal routine. I sewed, went to my doctor's appointments, visited Susan, talked to Arthur. On the outside, everything seemed the same. But inside, I was changing. I was preparing. I was getting stronger. Caleb still visited me occasionally, but I noticed he was increasingly stressed. He looked gaunt, anxious, nervous. He talked less, smiled less, and I knew something was about to explode. I knew Jessica was tightening the noose around my son's neck, and I knew eventually he would come to ask for my help like he always had. Until that day arrived. That Tuesday afternoon, when Caleb burst into my house unannounced, eyes shining with that look of pride mixed with desperation. "Mom, can you believe it? My wife lost her job after 10 years, Caleb repeated, closing the door behind him harder than necessary. I was sitting in my armchair, a half-sewn blouse on my lap, staring at him as he paced my small living room like a caged animal. "Now you and I are going to support her and her mother," he continued. And the way he said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if my opinion didn't matter at all, confirmed everything I had been suspecting for months. My son didn't make decisions anymore. My son obeyed orders. I already transferred my entire salary, $50,000, Caleb declared then. And those words hit me like a fist to the stomach. Everything he had saved plus a loan he took from the bank. Jessica needs it to be calm while she looks for work, and also to help Linda because she hasn't found anything yet either. He said it all in one breath, without breathing, as if he needed to convince himself he had done the right thing. I didn't say anything yet. I just watched him. I watched my 35-year-old son, a grown man with a college education I paid for by sacrificing my health, standing in front of me, justifying why he had just given away $50,000 without thinking twice. $50,000, that was his entire net worth. $50,000 he had saved for years working as an engineer. $50,000 that were now in the hands of a woman who had just lost her job and whose first instinct was apparently to reach out and take her husband's money. You understand, right, Mom? Caleb asked me, stepping closer with that look of a child seeking approval I knew so well. It's just temporary, until Jessica finds something new. She has experience, she has contacts, I'm sure she'll get a job soon. And in the meantime, we support her. We, that word rang in my ears like an alarm bell. We, he, and I. As if I had been consulted. As if I had signed that check along with him. As if my money, my time, my health were unlimited resources he could commit without asking me. How long is temporary, Caleb? I asked calmly, keeping my hands busy with the needle and thread so he wouldn't see them shaking. He blinked, confused by the question. I don't know, Mom. 2 months, maybe 3, he replied, shrugging. Jessica is very good at what she does. I don't think it will take long. And in the meantime, what are you all going to live on? I continued asking, never looking up from my sewing. Caleb fell silent for a moment. On the money I have left from this month, I guess, he finally said. And whatever you can help me with if things get tough. There it was, the real reason for his visit, the real reason he had come to my house with that news. It wasn't to inform me, it was to prep me, to soften me up, so that when he came in a few days or a week with his hand out asking for money, I would already be mentally prepared to give it to him without asking questions. I looked up and looked him straight in the eye. Caleb, how much money do you have left for the month? I asked him. He shifted uncomfortably. Not much, Mom. I just got paid a week ago and I already transferred everything, he replied, scratching the back of his neck. But don't worry. I'll figure it out. I always do. Do you have to pay rent this week? I reminded him. Yes, he replied. And the car payment? I continued. Yes, Mom, I know, he said, slightly irritated. And food, Caleb? You also have to eat. And Jessica too. And Linda too, I added. 3 people in your house who now depend completely on a paycheck you just gave away. He opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, stopping him. I have bills to pay, expensive prescriptions, and a mortgage payment due in a week, I told him. And I saw his expression slowly change, as if he were just now starting to understand that his mother wasn't a bottomless ATM. I just smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy or sadness. It was a smile of understanding, of acceptance, of someone who finally understands that the time has come to say enough. And what are you going to live on now, Caleb? I asked him with that smile still on my lips. And where? The question fell on him like a slab of concrete. I saw his face go from confusion to bewilderment, from bewilderment to realization, and from realization to fear, because my son only in that moment realized what he had done. Only in that moment did he understand that he had given away all his money without having a backup plan, without having emergency savings, without having anything. And worst of all, he was just now understanding that his mother, the woman who had always been there to rescue him, to support him, to give him what he needed, even if she didn't have it, wasn't going to do it this time. Well, I thought. Caleb began to stutter. But he didn't complete the sentence because he didn't know how to finish it. You thought I was going to help you? I finished the sentence for him. Did you think your mother was going to open her wallet like she always has and give you the money you need to pay your bills while you support your wife and your mother-in-law? Caleb swallowed hard. It's not like that, Mom. He tried to defend himself. I just came to tell you what happened. I didn't come to ask for money. Not yet, I added. You didn't come to ask for money yet, but you were going to. In a few days, when you realize you don't have enough, when Jessica asks for grocery money and you don't have it, When Linda needs something and Jessica demands you buy it for her. When the bank calls because the car payment is late. That's when you were going to come. Right, Caleb? My son stood in silence. He couldn't deny what we both knew was true. Do you know how much I make a month? I asked then, setting the sewing aside and clasping my hands in my lap. Caleb shook his head slowly. $400 from Social Security? I informed him. $400 for 40 years of work. And with luck, I make another $200 from sewing when there are enough orders. That's $600 a month, Caleb. Out of those $600, $350 go to the mortgage, $100 for utilities, electricity, water, gas, $200 for my prescriptions, if I can get the cheapest generic. That's already $650. And I haven't eaten yet. I haven't bought soap yet. I haven't paid the phone bill. I saw my son's eyes widen with every number I mentioned. He had never asked. He had never been interested in knowing how his mother lived. He just assumed I managed somehow, magically. And when he knew I wasn't managing, he gave me some money and left peacefully, thinking he had done his filial duty. So tell me, Caleb, where do you think I'm going to get money to help you support your wife and mother-in-law? I continued. Am I going to stop eating so Jessica can eat? Am I going to stop taking my diabetes medication so Linda can have her favorite shampoo? Am I going to lose my house so you can keep paying your rent after giving away all your money? Mom, no, it's not like that, Caleb protested, his voice cracking. I would never ask you to do that. The next sentence I said made him bite his tongue. Then why did you come here, Caleb? I said, standing up from my chair with effort, feeling my knees protest but ignoring the pain. Why did you come to tell me you gave away all your money? Why did you come to tell me you're now going to support 2 adult women perfectly capable of working? Why did you use the word we when you said we were going to support them? Explain that to me, son. My son opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He stood there, in the middle of my living room, like a scolded child who doesn't understand what he did wrong. And in that moment, seeing my 35-year-old son completely lost, without answers, without arguments, without anything, I understood the time had come, the moment Arthur had told me would come, the moment I had been preparing for over months. Sit down, Caleb, I ordered, pointing to the sofa. We have to talk, and this time you're going to listen to every word I say without interrupting me. My son obeyed. He sat on the edge of the sofa, hands between his knees, looking at the floor. I went back to my armchair, took the notebook I had kept in the drawer of the side table, that notebook where I had documented everything for the last few weeks, and opened it to the first page. I'm going to tell you a story, Caleb, I began. It's the story of a woman who was left a widow at 32 with a 12-year-old son. A woman who worked in a factory for 30 years, sewing uniforms until her hands were deformed by arthritis. A woman who worked double shifts and then kept sewing at home at night to pay for her son's college. A woman who sold the only jewelry she had, keepsakes from her dead husband, to pay for the first semester of engineering school. Caleb looked up, eyes shining. Mom, I know all that, he whispered. No, I interrupted. You don't know. You know the romantic version. You know your mom sacrificed for you, but you don't know the real numbers. You don't know how much it really cost. I opened the notebook to a specific page. $42,000, I informed him. That is what I spent on your college education, adding up tuition, books, transportation, food, housing for the first 2 years before you got the partial scholarship. $42,000 I didn't have, that I got by working until I destroyed my body, that I'm partly still paying because I had to take out loans that took me 10 years to pay off. Caleb was pale. I never asked you to do that, he said with a trembling voice. I know, I replied. You didn't ask me. I did it because you're my son and because I wanted you to have a better future than mine, and I don't regret it. But I need you to understand the value of that sacrifice. I need you to understand that every dollar I spent on you was a dollar I didn't spend on me. Every hour I worked for you was an hour I didn't rest. Every pain I ignored was so you wouldn't feel any. I turned to the next page of the notebook, and after all that, after you graduated and got a job, I thought I could finally rest. I continued. I thought I had done my part, that I had done everything a mother should do. But that wasn't the case, was it, Caleb? Because 3 years after graduating, when I was already sick, when I already had diabetes and high blood pressure, when I already needed expensive medicines I couldn't pay for. You started helping me, and I thanked you. I thanked you with all my soul because without your help, I wouldn't have survived. But do you know what I discovered a few months ago? My son looked at me confused, shaking his head. I discovered that from that joint account we opened a year ago, you've been taking money out without telling me. I revealed, and I saw his face turn even paler if that was possible. $1,800 in 6 months. Caleb, money that was for my prescriptions, for my medical emergencies, money you deposited with one hand and took out with the other. Caleb jumped to his feet. Mom, I can explain that, he started to say hurriedly. Jessica needed money for some things and I didn't have it at the moment, so I thought I could borrow from there and put it back later, but things got complicated and… Silence. I interrupted him with a firm voice. Sit down and listen. He obeyed, sinking back into the sofa. His body language had changed completely. He was no longer the proud man who had entered announcing his great act of generosity. Now he was a scared child facing the consequences of his actions. And you need to know something else, I continued. That account doesn't exist anymore. I closed it 3 weeks ago. I opened a new account only in my name. The money that was left, which wasn't much after your unauthorized withdrawals, is now in a place where only I can access it. Caleb opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. I haven't finished, I warned him. I also spoke to a lawyer, Arthur, a friend of the family. He helped me organize my entire financial situation, document everything, protect the little I have, and he helped me draft this. I took a folded white envelope out of the notebook. It's a letter for you, I explained. A letter where I establish clear boundaries, where I explain to you that I can no longer continue to be your financial safety net, that you are a 35-year-old adult with a stable job, and that it is your responsibility to handle your own life and your own finances. That I need to take care of myself now because no one else is going to do it. I held out the envelope, but Caleb didn't take it. He just looked at me with a mixture of shock, pain, and something that looked like betrayal in his eyes. I can't believe you did all this behind my back, he finally said with a hoarse voice. Behind your back, I repeated with disbelief. Caleb, you have been taking money from my account behind my back for months. You just gave away $50,000 and came to tell me that now we are going to support your wife without even asking me if I could or wanted to do it. And you talked to me about doing things behind backs? My son ran his hands over his face, breathing deeply. This is because of Jessica, isn't it? He said then. You never liked her. You never accepted her. And now that she's going through a hard time, you're taking the opportunity to… To what, Caleb? I interrupted. To protect myself. To protect my house, my medicine, my survival. Because if I run out of money, if I lose this house, if I can't buy my prescriptions, what's going to happen? I'm going to end up being the one who has to go live with you. I'm going to be the one who needs to be supported. And tell me, son, in that apartment where 3 people already live, where neither of the 2 women works, where you just gave away all your money, would there be room for me? Would Jessica receive me with open arms? Or would they leave me on the street? The silence that followed was deafening. Caleb didn't answer because he couldn't, because we both knew the answer. Jessica barely tolerated me when I was far away, when I was just the mother-in-law who appeared once a month. The idea of me living under the same roof as her was unthinkable. She would see me as a burden, as a nuisance, as something to get rid of as quickly as possible. It's not fair, Caleb murmured finally. Jessica isn't like that. She's not as bad as you think. Then tell me, I asked, why did Jessica lose her job? Caleb blinked. I told you, she was fired, he replied, after 10 years. Company crisis. Staff cuts. Several people lost their jobs. Are you sure about that? I asked. Completely sure. Or is that what Jessica told you? Caleb frowned. Why do you say it like that? He asked suspiciously. Because I investigated a little too, I admitted. Susan, my neighbor, has a niece who works at the same company where Jessica worked. And according to what she told me, Jessica wasn't fired. She quit. She submitted her voluntary resignation a month ago. I saw the color drain completely from my son's face. That's not true, he said, shaking his head. Jessica told me they fired her. She showed me the termination letter. Why would she lie to me about that? For the money, Caleb, I replied simply. Because if she told you she quit voluntarily, you would have asked her why. You would have asked her what plans she has, how she's going to pay her bills. But if she tells you she was fired, that it was unfair, that she's devastated, then you go into hero mode. You want to protect her, take care of her, give her everything she needs to feel better. And that is exactly what you did. You gave her $50,000 without asking questions. That doesn't make sense, Caleb protested, but his voice no longer had the same conviction. Why would she quit a stable job after 10 years? That is the question you should ask her, I replied. But if you want my opinion, I think Jessica has a plan. I think that money you gave her isn't to survive while she looks for work. It's for something else. Maybe to open her own business. Maybe to invest in something. I don't know. But what I do know is that she lied to you. And if she lied to you about something so important, what else has she lied to you about? Caleb stood up abruptly. I need to go, he said, walking toward the door. I need to talk to Jessica. I need to clear this up. Wait, I called him. He stopped, but didn't turn around. When you talk to her, when you ask her about the resignation, pay attention to how she reacts. Pay attention to if she gets defensive, if she makes you feel guilty for doubting her, if she manipulates you emotionally so you forget the subject. And then ask yourself if that is the woman you want to spend the rest of your life with. Caleb left my house without saying anything else. The door closed behind him, and I stayed there, sitting in my armchair, with the notebook still open on my lap and the envelope he hadn't wanted to take in my hand. My heart was beating fast. My hands were shaking. I had done what I had to do, but that didn't make it hurt any less. I had just confronted my son, revealed truths he didn't want to hear, shattered the perfect image he had of his marriage, and I didn't know how he was going to react. I didn't know if he was going to believe me or if he was going to choose to believe Jessica. I didn't know if this was going to push him away from me forever or if he was finally going to open his eyes. I sat there for a long time, until I heard a knock on the door. It was Susan. She had seen Caleb leave my house and had come to see how I was. How did it go? Susan asked me, entering my living room and sitting next to me. I told her everything. Every word I had said, every reaction from Caleb, how he had left my house without even taking the letter I had prepared for him. Susan listened in silence, nodding occasionally, and when I finished speaking, she took my hands in hers. You did the right thing, Barbara, she told me firmly. It was hard, it was painful, but it was necessary. Your son needed to hear those truths. Now it's up to him what he does with that information. But what if he chooses to believe Jessica? I said quietly, voicing my greatest fear. What if he decides I'm the bad guy, that I'm making things up, that I just want to break them up? Then you will have done everything you could do, Susan replied. You can't force him to see what he doesn't want to see. Barbara, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. The only thing you can do is protect yourself and hope that eventually he realizes it on his own. She was right. I knew it. But that didn't make it easier to accept. The next few days were strange. Caleb didn't call me. He didn't come visit. He didn't answer the 2 messages I sent asking if he was okay. It was as if he had disappeared. And I started to worry for real. I started thinking maybe I had been too hard on him, that maybe I should have handled it differently, with more delicacy, with more care. But Arthur, when I went to visit him to tell him what had happened, reminded me why I had done what I did. Barbara, your son is 35, he told me. He's not a teenager. He's a grown man who made a terrible decision and now has to face the consequences. You told him the truth. That is never wrong, even if it hurts. Now he needs time to process that truth, to investigate on his own, to make his own decisions. Give him that time. A week after the confrontation, I received a call. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered with some suspicion. Mom, it's me, said the voice on the other end. It was Caleb. His voice sounded tired, defeated, broken. Son, where are you? I asked immediately. Are you okay? I'm in a hotel, he replied. I left the house 3 days ago. I needed space to think. My heart raced. What happened, Caleb? Did you talk to Jessica? There was a long silence. Yes, he finally said. I talked to her. And you were right, Mom. You were right about everything. He told me everything. He told me he had arrived at his apartment that night after leaving my house, still in shock from everything I had told him. He had found Jessica and Linda sitting in the living room watching TV, comfortable, relaxed, as if they didn't have a care in the world. And something about that image had bothered him. Caleb had told them he needed to talk to Jessica alone. Linda had protested, saying anything they had to discuss they could discuss in front of her because she was family, but Caleb had insisted. Finally, Linda had gone to the guest room, which was now her bedroom, not without giving Caleb a look of disapproval. Caleb had asked Jessica directly about the firing. He had told her he needed to see the official letter from the company. Jessica had immediately gone on the defensive. Why do you want to see that? She had asked him. Don't you trust me? I need to see it, Caleb had insisted. Jessica had tried to change the subject, had tried to make him feel guilty for doubting her, exactly as I had warned him she would. But Caleb, for the first time in a long time, hadn't caved. He had kept insisting until Jessica, cornered, had exploded. Finally, she had admitted the truth. She hadn't been fired. She had quit. And why? Caleb had asked her. Why did you lie to me about something so important? Because I knew you were going to react badly, Jessica had said. Because I knew you were going to question me, that you were going to judge me, that you wouldn't understand my reasons. Then what are your reasons? Caleb had asked. Explain them to me now. Jessica had told him she was tired of working for others, that she wanted to start her own business, that she had an opportunity to partner with a friend to open a digital marketing agency, that's why she needed the money, that's why she had quit, to dedicate herself fully to the project. And why didn't you tell me before? Caleb had asked. Why did you have to lie to me? Because I knew you wouldn't support me, Jessica had replied. Because I knew you were going to say it was risky, that I should keep my stable job, that it wasn't the time. So, instead of talking to me as my wife, you decided to manipulate me, Caleb had said, feeling the rage grow in his chest. You decided to lie to me, make me believe you were fired unfairly, so that I would give you all my money without asking questions. Jessica had tried to justify herself. It wasn't like that, Caleb. I just needed your support. I needed you to trust me. My support, Caleb had repeated with disbelief. You took $50,000 from me by lying. That isn't asking for support. That is stealing. The argument had escalated. Linda had come out of her room to defend her daughter. She had accused Caleb of being a bad husband, of not supporting Jessica's dreams, of being selfish. Caleb had asked them then about Linda. Why was she also living with them? When did she plan to look for work? Linda had been offended. I help with the house, she had said. I clean, I cook, I do the shopping. With what money do you do the shopping? Caleb had asked her. With mine, Linda had replied without flinching. With the money you give us, because now we depend on you until Jessica starts generating income with her business. And when is she going to do that? Caleb had asked. A new business can take months, even years, to make a profit. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? Work, Jessica had said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. That's what you're the man of the house for, to provide. And your mother can also help a little. It's not that big a deal. And that was when Caleb had finally seen the whole truth. When he had understood that Jessica had never seen him as a partner, as an equal. She had seen him as a provider, as a walking wallet. And not only that, she had also planned to use his mother-in-law, me, as an additional source of income. I left the house that same night, Caleb told me over the phone. I packed a suitcase with the essentials and left. I'm staying at a cheap motel. I don't know what I'm going to do, Mom. I don't know how I got to this point. I cried listening to him. I cried for my son. I cried because he had finally opened his eyes, but the price had been so high. Where are you exactly? I asked him. Give me the address. I'm coming over there. No, Mom, he protested. I don't want you spending money on a taxi. I'm fine. You are not fine, I told him firmly. And I'm not taking a taxi. I'm going to ask Susan to drive me. Give me the address. Caleb, after some resistance, gave it to me. I hung up the phone, called Susan, and 20 minutes later, we were on our way. The motel was modest, in a not very good part of town. Susan walked me to the room. Caleb opened the door, and seeing him like that, haggard, unshaven, with red, swollen eyes, broke my heart. I went in and hugged him. He collapsed in my arms and cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. "I'm sorry, Mom," he repeated over and over. "I'm so sorry. You were right. You were always right, and I didn't want to listen to you. Don't apologize to me," I told him, stroking his hair. "You didn't do anything wrong to me. You hurt yourself by not seeing what was in front of you, but now you see it. And that is what matters." We sat on the small motel bed, the three of us, Susan, Caleb, and I. The room was depressing, with stained walls and a worn carpet that smelled of dampness. But at that moment it didn't matter where we were. The important thing was that my son was finally seeing reality. "Tell me everything," I asked, taking his hand in mine. Caleb took a deep breath and began to speak. He told me things I didn't know, things he had been hiding for months, maybe years. He told me that Jessica had always been controlling with money, that from the beginning of the marriage she had insisted on managing both their finances, telling him she was better with numbers, to trust her. Caleb had accepted because it seemed reasonable. Jessica earned more than him back then. She had management experience, and he was in love and trusted her blindly. But little by little, Jessica had started spending more than they earned. Expensive clothes, expensive restaurants, trips they couldn't afford. And when Caleb asked her how they were going to pay for all that, she always had an answer. "Don't worry, I've got it handled. Trust me." And he trusted, until the debts started coming in. 2 years ago, Caleb told me, I discovered that Jessica had taken out 3 credit cards in my name without telling me. She had maxed them out buying things for the house, clothes for herself, gifts for her mother. When I confronted her, she cried. She told me she just wanted us to live well, not to worry, that she was going to pay everything with her salary, and I believed her. I worked more overtime to help pay those debts. I killed myself working, Mom, to pay for things I didn't even know we had. "And why didn't you tell me any of this?" I asked with a tight heart. "Out of shame," Caleb admitted, "because I was ashamed to accept that my wife was manipulating me, because I thought it was my fault, that if I earned more money, if I were a better provider, she wouldn't have to do those things." Jessica was very good at making me feel that way. Every time I protested, she told me I was cheap, that I didn't want her to be happy, that all her friends had husbands who gave them everything, and I was the only one who complained about money. Susan shook her head in disgust. "That woman is a professional manipulator," she said, "and you fell into her trap because you're a good man who wants to make his wife happy. But there is a difference between making someone happy and letting yourself be destroyed by that person," Caleb continued. He told me that when Linda, Jessica's mother, had lost her job 2 months ago, it hadn't been a surprise to anyone. Linda had been fired for constant absences, for not fulfilling her responsibilities. But Jessica had insisted her mother move in with them. She didn't ask Caleb. She simply informed him. "My mom has nowhere to go," she had told him. "She's going to stay with us until she finds something." "And it's been 2 months already," said Caleb bitterly. 2 months where Linda hasn't looked for a single job. She spends all day watching TV, criticizing how I do things, interfering in my marriage. And when I tell Jessica that her mother needs to start looking for work, she gets mad at me. She tells me I'm insensitive, asking how could I throw her mom out on the street. "But nobody is talking about throwing her out on the street," I explained. "Just that she also be responsible for her own life. She's 55, she's healthy, she can work." "Exactly," Caleb agreed. "But Jessica doesn't see it that way. To her, I have the obligation to support her mother because I'm the man, because I earn well, because what kind of son-in-law would I be if I didn't? And now, after all this, after Jessica quit her job lying, after she took $50,000 from me for a business she never honestly told me about, what am I supposed to do?" asked Caleb, looking at me with desperation. "I have no money, Mom. I gave everything to Jessica. And now I have to pay my rent, the car, my food, and I don't know how I'm going to do it." I thought about my bank account, about the few dollars I had saved. I thought about giving my son something so he could survive this month. But I stopped myself, because giving him money now would be repeating the pattern. It would mean continuing to be his safety net, preventing him from learning to be truly responsible for his own decisions. Caleb, I told him with a soft but firm voice, I cannot give you money. Not because I don't love you, not because I don't care what happens to you, but because if I give you money now, you are not going to learn the lesson you need to learn. I saw the pain in his eyes, but I also saw understanding. I know, Mom, he whispered. I know, and I'm not asking you for it. I just needed to vent. I needed someone to listen to me without judging me. I don't judge you, son, I assured him. I love you. But I also need you to understand that decisions have consequences. You made the decision to give all your money to Jessica without verifying her story. That was your decision. And now you have to live with the consequences of that decision. So, what do I do? Asked Caleb. How do I get out of this? Susan spoke for the first time in several minutes. First, you need to talk to the bank about that loan you took out, she told him. If you took out $50,000, a part must be from your savings and another part must be borrowed. You need to know exactly how much you owe and establish a payment plan. Caleb nodded. I took $20,000 from my savings and $30,000 borrowed, he admitted. I have to start paying back the loan next month. $500 a month for 6 years. Second, Susan continued, you need to talk to Jessica about the money. That money you gave her, if it was for a business, there needs to be a written agreement. You need to be a partner in that business, or you need her to commit to paying you back the money when the business starts making a profit. You can't just give away $50,000 and be left with nothing. Caleb looked overwhelmed but nodded. And third, I added, you need to make a decision about your marriage. Because after this, after the lies, the manipulation, the control, you need to ask yourself if this is what you want for the rest of your life. If you want to stay married to a woman who sees you as an ATM and not as a partner. I still love her, said Caleb quietly. Or at least I love the woman I thought she was. I don't know if that woman really exists or if she was always an illusion. Love is not enough, son, I told him. Love without respect, without honesty, without reciprocity, isn't love. It's dependency, it's habit, it's fear of being alone, but it isn't true love. Caleb stayed quiet for a long time, processing everything. Finally, he spoke. I need to get my money back, he said, or at least part of it. I can't let Jessica keep $50,000 after lying to me. But how? The money is already in her account. That's where Arthur comes in, said Susan. Barbara, you should take Caleb to see Arthur tomorrow. He can give him legal advice on what options he has. I nodded. It's a good idea. Arthur knows the law. He can guide you on how to protect yourself, how to recover at least some of that money, and what steps to follow regarding your marriage. Caleb accepted. We agreed that the next day, in the morning, the three of us would go see Arthur. In the meantime, I suggested Caleb come stay at my house instead of spending money on the hotel. Mom, I don't want to be a burden, he protested. You aren't a burden, I told him. You are my son, and you are going through a hard time. But I need you to understand that coming to my house doesn't mean I'm going to solve your problems. It means I'm going to give you a place to sleep while you solve your own problems. There is a difference, Caleb accepted. He paid for the last night at the hotel with his credit card, gathered his few things, and the three of us went to my house. Susan said goodbye at the door. I'll be looking out, she told me, giving me a hug. If you need anything, just call. That night, Caleb slept on the small sofa in my living room because I didn't have a spare room. I covered him with an old blanket and watched him sleep like when he was a child. My heart was divided between the pain of seeing him like this and the relief of knowing he was finally waking up. The next morning we went to see Arthur. Caleb told him the whole story, from beginning to end. Arthur listened carefully, taking notes occasionally. When Caleb finished, Arthur leaned back in his chair and sighed. Legally, you have options, Arthur told Caleb after listening to the whole story. But none are easy and all require you to make difficult decisions. First, about the money. If you transferred $50,000 to your wife's account, that money is technically hers now. However, if you can prove that money was obtained through fraud or deceit, specifically that she lied about losing her job to manipulate you into giving her the money, you might have a case, but you would have to be willing to sue her in civil court. And if you do that, your marriage is definitely over. Caleb swallowed hard. I don't know if I want to get to that point, he admitted. Then your other option, Arthur continued, is to talk to her directly and demand she return the money, or at least a part. If she refuses, and she probably will, then you need to decide if you are willing to stay in a marriage where you lost $50,000 and your wife feels no remorse for lying to you. Caleb looked pale. And about the loan I took out? He asked. That loan is in your name, Arthur replied. You are legally responsible for paying it, regardless of where the money is now. The bank doesn't care if you gave it to your wife or threw it out the window. You have to pay $500 a month for 6 years. That is your reality. If you don't pay, you'll ruin your credit score, and eventually the bank will take legal action against you. Caleb put his head in his hands. I'm ruined, he murmured. I'm going to be paying this loan for years for money I don't even have anymore. You aren't ruined, Arthur corrected him. You are in a difficult situation, but not impossible. You have a stable job. You have income. What you need to do is adjust your lifestyle dramatically. You need to reduce expenses. You need to maybe get a second temporary job. You need to be disciplined with every cent you earn. It is possible to get out of this, but it requires sacrifice. Caleb looked up. I need to talk to Jessica, he said with determination. I need to confront her again, but this time with all the information. I need her to explain exactly what she plans to do with that money, and when she plans to pay me back, even if it's a part. And if she refuses, then I need to make more drastic decisions. Arthur nodded. I suggest that when you talk to her, you do it in a neutral place, not in the apartment, and if possible, record the conversation. In this state, it is legal to record conversations as long as one of the parties is aware, and in this case, that party would be you. If she admits she lied about the firing, if she refuses to return the money, if she says something that can be used legally later, you need to have proof. Caleb took out his phone. Can I record with this? He asked. Arthur nodded. Yes, but be discreet. Don't tell her you're recording her, because then she's going to measure every word she says. You need her honest reaction. We left Arthur's office with a plan. Caleb was going to contact Jessica to meet her at a public coffee shop the next day. He was going to ask for clear explanations. He was going to demand she return at least part of the money, and depending on how she reacted, he would make the corresponding decisions. That afternoon, Caleb called Jessica. We need to talk, he told her when she answered. Now isn't a good time, Caleb, Jessica replied with an irritated tone. I'm busy organizing things for the business. I don't care, said Caleb with a firmness I hadn't heard from him before. We need to talk tomorrow. Meet me at Rosales Cafe at 2 in the afternoon. I'll be there, and I hope you will too. He hung up without waiting for an answer. I'm proud of you, I told him. You're starting to set boundaries. That is what you need to do. That night, Caleb barely slept. I heard him tossing and turning on the sofa, sighing, getting up to drink water. I knew he was nervous about the confrontation the next day, and he had every right to be. The next morning, we had breakfast together. I made coffee and scrambled some eggs with the little I had in the fridge. Caleb ate little. You're going to be okay, I assured him. Just remember that no matter what she says, no matter how she tries to manipulate you, you know the truth. Stand firm in that truth. He nodded. Do you want me to go with you? I offered. I can sit at another table, just so you aren't alone. Caleb considered it for a moment, but then shook his head. No, Mom, I need to do this alone. But thanks for the offer. At 1:30, Caleb got dressed as best he could with the limited clothes he had brought from the motel. He looked tired, but determined. He hugged me before leaving. Wish me luck, he told me. You don't need luck, son, I replied. You need clarity, and you already have that. Caleb left, and I stayed in my house waiting, praying for everything to go well. Susan came to keep me company. We sat together in my living room drinking tea, talking about everything and nothing, trying to distract ourselves. But my mind was with my son. 3 hours later, Caleb returned. He walked through the door, and I knew immediately from his expression that it hadn't been good news. What happened? I asked, getting up from my chair. Caleb let himself fall onto the sofa, exhausted. Jessica didn't show, he said with a hollow voice. I waited for her for an hour. I sent her messages. I called her. Nothing. Finally, she replied to a message saying if I wanted to talk to her, I had to go to the apartment, that she wasn't going to move from there just because I asked her to. That woman has no shame, said Susan with indignation. She's wasting your time on purpose. She's playing with you. I know, replied Caleb. That's why I went to the apartment. You went? I asked, surprised. Caleb nodded. Yes. I decided enough was enough. If she wouldn't come to me, I was going to her. I got to the apartment and knocked on the door. Jessica opened it like nothing was wrong. Hi, Caleb, she told me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I told her I had been waiting for her, that she had stood me up. She shrugged. I forgot, she said. I've been very busy with the business. I entered the apartment, and there was Linda, sitting on the sofa I had helped pay for, eating cookies, watching TV. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at me with contempt and kept watching her show. Caleb continued. I told Jessica we needed to talk in private. She told me anything I had to say I could say in front of her mother. That there were no secrets, so I spoke right there, in front of both of them. I told her I needed her to return the money. I explained I had taken out a loan of $30,000 that I now had to pay, that I had no savings, that I was in a desperate financial situation. I asked her to please return, even if just $20,000, so I could breathe a little. And what did she say? Asked Susan, leaning forward. Caleb let out a bitter laugh. She said no, that money was already invested in the business, that she couldn't return it even if she wanted to because she had already used it to pay deposits, to buy equipment, to register the company, that I should be proud to be investing in our future instead of being so selfish. I told her she had lied to me, Caleb continued. I told her she hadn't been fired, that she had quit voluntarily without telling me. Jessica wasn't even surprised. She just looked at me and said, So what if I quit? It was my job, my decision. You didn't have to have an opinion. I reminded her, we are married, that major decisions are supposed to be made together. She laughed. She laughed in my face, Mom. And she told me I had never made important decisions, that it had always been her handling everything, thinking for both of us, making sure we had a good life, that I was just the one who brought the money and I didn't even do that well. I felt the rage rising in my chest. That woman is despicable, I said, completely despicable. And Linda? Asked Susan. What did she do during all this? Caleb shook his head with disgust. Linda supported every word Jessica said. She told me I was a bad husband, that any man would be proud to have an entrepreneurial wife like Jessica, that I should be thanking her for putting up with me being so mediocre, that if I couldn't support them adequately, maybe Jessica should look for a man who could. In that moment I knew there was no turning back, said Caleb, looking me straight in the eyes. In that moment I understood that those two women had never respected me. They had never seen me as a partner or as family. They only saw me as a means to get what they wanted. And I had been too blind, too naive, too in love to realize it. What did you do then? I asked Caleb, although a part of me already knew the answer. I told them I was going to get a divorce, replied Caleb. I told them our marriage was over, that I was going to contact a lawyer and start divorce proceedings as soon as possible. Jessica stayed quiet for a moment. I think she didn't expect me to say that. Then she recovered and told me that was fine. That anyway, she had also been thinking about divorce. That I had never been enough for her. That go ahead, divorce her, but not to expect to recover a single cent of the money I had given her. That money was hers now. Period. Caleb paused, breathing deeply. And then she said something that left me frozen. She told me if I tried to recover the money legally, if I sued her, she was going to countersue. She was going to say I had been abusive during the marriage, that I had controlled her financially, that I had manipulated her emotionally, that she had friends who would testify in her favor, that she was going to ruin my reputation in such a way I would never get another decent job. Susan stood up indignant. That woman is a menace, she said. She is threatening you with false accusations so you don't recover your own money. That is blackmail, Caleb. That is illegal. I know, replied Caleb tiredly. But I also know that even if they are false accusations, the simple fact they exist can already ruin my life. Accusations of abuse, even if they are lies, stay on the record. Employers see them. People believe them. And Jessica knows it. That's why she's threatening me with that. I sat next to my son and took his hand. Caleb, look at me, I told him. He looked up, eyes glassy. You cannot let fear paralyze you, I continued. Yes, she can make false accusations. Yes, that can complicate things. But the truth eventually comes to light, and you have something she doesn't. You have integrity. You have witnesses to how you really are. You have years of a clean work history, of being a good man, a good son, a good professional. Those lies aren't going to hold up because there is no real evidence. But he is right about one thing, interrupted Susan. False accusations can cause a lot of damage before the truth comes out. Caleb needs to protect himself. He needs to document everything. Every interaction with Jessica from now on needs to be recorded. Arthur told us to record the conversations, I said. Caleb, did you record anything of what happened today? Caleb took out his phone. Yes, he said. I have the part where Jessica admits she quit voluntarily, where she refuses to return the money, and where she threatens to falsely accuse me if I try to recover it. That is gold, said Susan. That protects Caleb legally. If she makes those accusations, he can prove they were premeditated threats to prevent him from recovering his money. Caleb needs to take it to Arthur immediately, I suggested. Arthur will know what to do with that recording and how to use it to protect Caleb. Let's go right now, said Susan, getting up. There is no time to waste. The three of us went back to Arthur's house. When we arrived, it was almost night. Arthur received us, and Caleb showed him the recording. Arthur listened attentively, taking notes. When it finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them thoughtfully. This changes things, he said finally. This recording proves 3 important things. First, that Jessica lied about her firing. Second, that she refuses to return the money obtained through that deceit. Third, that she is threatening to make false accusations specifically to prevent you from recovering your money. This last point is especially important because it demonstrates premeditation and malice. So I can use it if she sues me? Asked Caleb. You can, replied Arthur, but more importantly, this recording gives you leverage. Listen to me well, Caleb. You don't want to go to trial. Trials are long, expensive, exhausting. What you want is to reach a settlement. And this recording is your bargaining chip. Arthur explained his plan. Caleb should hire a divorce lawyer, someone who could handle both the divorce and the money recovery. That lawyer would contact Jessica with a simple proposal. Caleb would not sue her for fraud or press criminal charges if she accepted returning at least half the money, $25,000, in agreed payments. If she refused, then Caleb would proceed with all possible legal actions, including presenting the recording as evidence of her threats. It is likely she will accept, said Arthur, because if this goes to trial, that recording destroys her. A judge hearing how she threatens false accusations isn't going to have any sympathy for her. And her new business is also going to be affected because who wants to work with someone who has that kind of documented conduct? Caleb nodded slowly. So I need to get a divorce lawyer, he said. But I don't have money to pay one. Good lawyers are expensive. Some work with payment plans, suggested Arthur. And given the circumstances of your case, where there is a significant amount of money at stake, it is possible you find one willing to work on contingency, taking a percentage of what is recovered. That is, if you manage to recover $25,000, the lawyer keeps a percentage of that as payment. Caleb looked overwhelmed, but also hopeful. Can you recommend someone? He asked Arthur. I know several, replied Arthur. Let me make some calls tomorrow. I'm going to connect you with someone good, someone I trust. Meanwhile, you need to gather all possible documentation. Bank statements showing the transfer of the $50,000, the contract of the loan you took out, any text messages or emails between you and Jessica about the money. Everything you can gather. That night we returned to my house exhausted. Caleb looked different. He was still tired, he was still stressed, but there was something new in his eyes. Determination, purpose. He was no longer the defeated man who had arrived at my door a few days ago. Now he was someone fighting to reclaim his life. Thanks, Mom, he told me before lying down on the sofa, for everything. For not giving me money when I asked you indirectly. For telling me the truth even though it hurt. For being here now, supporting me the right way. I hugged him tight. You are my son, I told him. I am always going to be here for you. But being here for you doesn't mean solving your problems. It means accompanying you while you solve them yourself, and that is exactly what I am doing. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Arthur kept his word and connected Caleb with a lawyer named Patricia, a woman around 40, serious and professional. Patricia reviewed all the documentation, listened to the recording, and agreed to take the case. She told Caleb there were good chances of recovering at least part of the money, but they needed to act fast before Jessica spent everything on her business. Patricia sent a formal letter to Jessica proposing the settlement, $25,000 returned in payments over 2 years, and Caleb would withdraw any legal action. We waited 3 days with no answer. Caleb was anxious. Every time his phone rang, he thought it was Jessica or his lawyer, but nothing. Until finally, on the 4th day, Patricia called. Jessica responded. She told Caleb, she wants to negotiate. She wants to meet with you and me to discuss the terms. Caleb looked at me. Do you want me to go with you? I asked. No, Mom, he replied. You have done enough. This is something I need to do alone. But thanks. The meeting was scheduled for the next day at Patricia's office. Caleb mentally prepared himself all night. He rehearsed what he was going to say, how he was going to stand firm, how he wasn't going to let Jessica manipulate him emotionally. The next morning he left early. Susan came to keep me company while we waited for news. We drank coffee, talked, tried to stay calm. Finally, mid-afternoon, Caleb returned. He was holding papers in his hand and wore an expression I couldn't decipher if it was relief or sadness. We signed an agreement, he announced, dropping into a kitchen chair. Jessica is going to pay me back $20,000. It's not the $25,000 we asked for, but Patricia said it was better to accept $20,000 guaranteed than risk a trial for the $25,000. She's going to pay in monthly installments of $1,000 for 20 months. Patricia made sure the agreement is legally binding. If Jessica is late on a payment, I can take legal action immediately. That is good, son, I told him. You recovered something at least. It's not everything, but it's something. And the divorce? Asked Susan. We also agreed on the divorce terms, replied Caleb. Division of assets. I keep the car because it's in my name and I'm paying for it. She keeps the furniture in the apartment. There are no kids involved, so that part is simpler. The divorce should be finalized in about 4 months. And Linda, I asked, what is going to happen to her? That is Jessica's problem now, said Caleb with a tone I had never heard from him before. I no longer have any responsibility for my future ex-wife's mother. Let Jessica support her with her business money, or let Linda finally look for work. It's not my problem anymore. I felt proud. My son was finally setting boundaries. He was finally standing up for himself. He was finally truly growing up. The following months were of rebuilding. Caleb stayed living with me during that time, not because he couldn't get his own place, but because we both realized it did us good to be together. He helped me with heavy things around the house, with repairs I couldn't do alone. I cooked for him, did his laundry, but not like a mother spoiling him, but like a roommate sharing responsibilities. We established clear rules. Caleb paid a proportional share of the utilities. He bought his own food, although generally we cooked together. He respected my schedule and my space, and I respected his. It was a different relationship than we had had before, healthier, more balanced, more adult to adult than dependent mother to son. Caleb began paying his loan religiously, $500 every month without fail. He got an extra job on weekends tutoring engineering students. He didn't earn much, but every extra dollar helped. He reduced all his expenses to the minimum. He stopped eating out. He stopped buying unnecessary things. He became disciplined with his money in a way he had never been before. And I watched him grow. I watched him mature. I watched him become the man I always knew he could be, but that comfort and Jessica's manipulation hadn't allowed him to be. Jessica met the first 3 payments of $1,000 on time. Then she started getting late. Patricia had to send her warning letters twice, but eventually she paid, even if late. According to what Caleb heard from mutual friends, Jessica's business wasn't doing as well as she had hoped. Turns out, entrepreneurship wasn't as easy as she thought. That without Caleb's constant financial backing, without someone paying the bills while she played businesswoman, things got complicated. Linda finally had to look for work because Jessica could no longer support her. She got something at a supermarket. A simple job, low pay, but it was work. And apparently Linda hated having to work after having spent months living for free at Caleb's expense. I didn't feel any satisfaction for her suffering. I only felt indifference. They made their decisions and now lived with the consequences. Just as Caleb was living with the consequences of his. 4 months after the meeting in Patricia's office, the divorce was finalized. Caleb came home that day with the signed papers. Officially, he was no longer married. "I'm supposed to feel something," he told me that night while we were having dinner. "Sadness, relief, something. But I just feel empty." "It's normal," I told him. "You were married 8 years. Even if the marriage was bad, even if she used you, there is still a loss. You are losing the future you thought you were going to have. It's okay to feel empty about that. Other feelings will come later." And they came. Little by little, Caleb started processing everything. There were bad days where he questioned all his decisions, where he blamed himself for being so blind. There were days where he missed having company, where loneliness weighed heavy. But there were also good days. Days where he realized how much freedom he had now. Days where he made decisions for himself without having to ask permission or justify himself. Days where his money was his and he could spend it how he wanted without anyone criticizing or manipulating him. 6 months after the divorce, Caleb finally saved enough to rent a small 1-bedroom apartment, modest, simple, but his. He asked me if it bothered me that he was leaving. "No, son," I told him, smiling. "It's time you have your own space again. You have worked hard to get here. I'm proud of you." Caleb moved out on a Saturday morning. Susan and I helped him. He didn't have many things, just the basics, but it was enough. When we finished arranging everything, we sat in his small living room to drink coffee. "It's small," said Caleb, looking around, "but it's mine. It's honest. Nobody manipulated me to get it. Nobody lied to me. It is the result of my work, and that makes it perfect." "Exactly," I told him. "That is what matters." Caleb started rebuilding his social life too. He reconnected with friends he had neglected during his marriage because Jessica always found reasons for him not to see them. He started going out more, doing things he liked, rediscovering who he was without the shadow of his ex-wife. A year after all the drama, Caleb came to visit me on a Sunday afternoon. He brought flowers, something he had never done before. "What are these for?" I asked, surprised. "For you, Mom," he replied. "To thank you for saving me, for not letting me keep sinking, for loving me enough to tell me the truth, even if it hurt me." "I didn't save you, son," I corrected him. "You saved yourself. I just showed you the door. You were the one who decided to walk through it." That day he told me he had finished paying half his loan, that he was saving again, that he felt in control of his life for the first time in years. He told me he had started dating someone new, a coworker. Nothing serious yet, but someone who treated him with respect, who valued his company, who didn't see his wallet when she looked at him. I was happy to hear it. Not for the fact he was dating someone, but because he was choosing better, because he had learned to see the red flags, because he was no longer willing to accept crumbs of affection in exchange for fully supporting another person. And I was better too. My health had stabilized. I kept taking my pills religiously, now without having to ration them, because I had closed the joint account and no one else was taking my money. I kept sewing, but at my own pace. Susan and I had become even closer. She was like the sister I never had. And Arthur still visited me occasionally to drink coffee and tell me stories from his days as a lawyer. I felt at peace, tranquil. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. 2 years after the day Caleb burst into my house announcing he had given away $50,000, we were having dinner together at my house. It was his birthday. 37 years old. He had also invited his new partner, Emily, a kind and hard-working woman whom I liked very much. Susan was there too. And Arthur. We were a small but real family. A family based on mutual respect, on healthy boundaries, on true love, and not on obligation or manipulation. As I watched them all chatting and laughing around my modest table, I thought about everything we had gone through to get here. I thought about the Barbara of 2 years ago. That tired woman who was being exploited by her own son without him realizing it. I thought about the Caleb of 2 years ago, that man blinded by a manipulative wife who had turned him into a puppet. And I thought about how much we had both changed. Caleb raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. We all raised our glasses. "To my mom," he said, looking me straight in the eyes, "for being the strongest woman I know, for not allowing me to keep destroying myself, for loving me enough to let me fall and then teaching me to get up alone. Everything I have now, everything I am now, is because you showed me that true love sometimes means saying no." We all toasted. I had tears in my eyes, but they were tears of happiness, of pride, of relief, because my son finally understood. He had finally learned the most important lesson of all: that sacrifice has limits, that giving everything doesn't make you a good parent or a good son or a good husband. It only makes you someone empty who has nothing left to give, and that sometimes the deepest form of love is allowing the people you love to face the consequences of their own decisions so they can grow. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my old armchair with a cup of hot tea. I looked around my small house. It wasn't much. The walls needed paint. The ceiling had a damp spot I had never been able to fix. The furniture was old and worn, but it was mine. I had paid for it with my work, with my effort, and no one was going to take it from me. I thought about the question I had asked Caleb that day that changed everything. "And what are you going to live on now? And where?" That simple question had uncovered a whole reality my son didn't want to see. And the next sentence, the one that made him bite his tongue, had been equally simple. "I'm not going to be the one to solve that for you." Those words had hurt, both him and me, because it is painful to see your son suffer the consequences of his mistakes. It is painful not to rescue him when you have the ability to do so, but it had been necessary, because rescuing him would have meant condemning him to never learn, to never grow, to never be truly independent. And now, 2 years later, my son was okay. Not perfect, not rich, not without problems, but okay, working honestly, living within his means, choosing better relationships, being responsible for his own life, and I was okay too, maybe better than ever, because I had learned that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing everything until nothing is left. It means guiding, supporting, advising. But it also means knowing when to let go, when to let your son fall so he learns to get up, when to say no so he learns to be strong. I closed my eyes and smiled. It had been a long and painful road, but it was worth it, because now, finally, both my son and I were free. Free from codependency, free from manipulation, free from the destructive patterns that had trapped us for so long. And that freedom, that peace, was priceless. No money in the world could buy it. It could only be earned with courage, with honesty, and with the willingness to do the right thing even if it was the hardest thing. And that is exactly what we had done.